So the next thing that we want to do is to create a virtual machine in DigitalOcean where we will host our Rancher instance. And let's have a look at the README file here. We use Docker machine once again in order to create a Docker host. And in this case, we will call it Rancher UI host. And after everything is set up via Docker machine, we have to point the Docker client to the right destination with the eval command. And as we see, there is no container running. And in the other tab, my terminal here, there are different containers running because it points to another, to the GitLab server. Okay, so the Docker compose file will basically use the Rancher container in the stable version and forward port 8080. And with that, we can start it up. And as we see here, the Rancher server is running. So as we see now, we have two droplets running. And this is the IP of the host. And on port 8080, we have the Rancher UI where we can take a look at it. So first of all, we will configure the access control with local authentication mode, and I will just create an admin user in this case. It's just the normal user that I will take. And once this is set up, we are logged in as this user. And the next thing that we have to do is to create a virtual machine where the actual containers that are hosted by Rancher will be running. And we have the same thing here as in the GitLab instances, where we have a container for the user interface, and then we have one or more containers for the runners of the CI pipeline. And in Rancher, it will be that we have a container for the management console, like the UI and the API and stuff like that. And then we have different hosts that will run our production environments. And actually, we can have different environments in Rancher, and for each environment, we can define own hosts. Like, for example, in a testing environment, you probably don't need that much of power as you might have in other environments like production environments and so on. So to create a host for an environment in Rancher, we first have to pick the environment, and this is the default one in this case. And then we go to infrastructure hosts, and we can create a host. And Rancher has certain integrations for cloud providers like, for example, DigitalOcean or AWS and Azure and stuff like that. You can do that on your own just with Docker machine, but we will just use this fancy user interface here. And for that, we need to paste the API token from DigitalOcean. So yeah, and then we have basically the same settings that we have when we configure a Docker machine. Yeah, there are a lot of different settings that we will not cover in this video. So let's just go ahead and create one. And besides the the provisioning of the virtual machine and the creation of the different Docker containers, Rancher will also run a Rancher agent as a Docker container, and we see all the containers here that are running in this host. And yeah, this is basically it. The Rancher runner, let's call it, will just start up now. And what we see here is another feature of Rancher, which is that you have a user interface. They call it catalog, where you can basically via a user interface create certain applications that might be one or multiple containers, and you can just click and start these containers. Going back to our host, we see that it is active now, and we can do the following thing. We can create an API token for Rancher. And Rancher itself has a command line interface, and this is the thing that we will use now. So I create a new API token, and we'll use that for my Rancher CLI command. So we have to basically do the 3 settings: access key, secret, and the Rancher URL. And when we have set up these environment variables, then we can connect to our Rancher server, which will be the one that we created earlier with the Docker machine. So, and there are a couple of operations that you can do with the Rancher CLI, and the one that we will care about right now is that we want to deploy a certain application. This is the one that my local environment from the GitHub repository. And when we go to the deployment directory, we see that there is a Docker Compose file, which is basically a description of my application as well as a database that it is using. And then we have another file called Rancher Compose, which basically it gives Rancher some additional information about what how the scalability of the containers is and stuff like that. And what we can do now is just call Rancher up, and with that it will connect to the Rancher management console in this environment that we set up. So this is the default environment, and we see that there has been a stack deployed called deployment in this case, because the folder is this exactly name. And within the stack there are two containers, or services as they are called in the in Rancher, and can have certain insights in the container. Or actually, a service is not exactly the same as a container, but we'll stick for now with the analogy here. And you can see you have certain logs about the service itself. And yeah, on the command line, obviously you get the output of the Rancher command. In this case, it will just show that the web application as well as the database will starting up. And with that, our Jetty is running, and when we give it the right context, we can log into the application and see that it is running and actually has data in it, which means that there is a database behind it that is actually working. Yeah, I will just go through some stuff to see that everything's correct here. But with that, we have successfully deployed an application manually through Rancher. And there's a lot of stuff to cover in Rancher, like you can define load balancers and different stuff. You can look at your config file, which has been deployed from the command line in this case, and then you can have other things like For example, you can have a list of all running containers in your environment regarding of the host where they are running. Then they have some kind of secrets management. And another interesting thing is that you can basically create a shell inside a container, and this is exposed via the user interface here, so we can just take a look at what is in the container that is running the web application. Then we have stuff like certificates, and you can point Docker registries to it or manage within Rancher, and there's a lot of stuff to cover.